Fantastic. Welcome. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Holden from Mobility International USA. And while I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to also see all of the names that are coming through or the chat. So please, if anything in the chat comes, love it if my co-presenters or if Jasmine could let me know if anything, there's anything in there I should address. But for now, I just want to say welcome and thank you so much for joining our session. Is my sound coming through okay? I'm hearing a little bit of an echo on my end, but I'll continue, but just let me know if I need to pause at all or make any adjustments. But for now, let's just dive in. We're here talking about diversifying the next generation of leaders and best practices from forward-thinking fellowship programs. And kind of what I meant by that is, we're really here during this IFS to learn about how can we make our fellowship programs forward-thinking, and what are the trends, what are the cutting edge things that we can be doing to really just keep pace with what our changing priorities are. And one of those priorities is disability. Let's just say it, diversity, equity, and inclusion, for which disability is a really important piece of that. And so, the motivation behind this session is that it's going to take leaders, decision makers, and contributors from so many different types of communities and backgrounds to create and contribute to a brighter future. And so that's why so many fellowship programs are taking this innovative approach to really actively encourage applicants from historically underrepresented groups to participate in programs that are hopefully going to end up diversifying the pipeline of those who are entering positions of leadership, and in many cases in global careers. And so that's kind of the emphasis that our session is going to be taking at, is we especially have this kind of passion for international education, international exchange, international development. And so I'm pulling a lot of examples from those sectors and looking at ways that organizations are trying to diversify the pipelines of leaders, and specifically to include leaders with disabilities in those pipelines. So let's see. I wanted to go through a few goals for this session. One is, how can we understand that disability is an aspect of diversity and identity? Why is it so often overlooked in these DEI strategies? And how can we, as an IFS community, help correct that by making sure that disability is part of those DEI strategies? And I think to help us kind of towards that goal, we're also going to be gleaning some strategies for applying a disability rights, disability inclusion, disability access, and disability leadership lens to different types of fellowship programs. And then finally, another goal for the session is to learn more from one another about promoting intersectionality and reaching multiply marginalized communities. And to kind of help illustrate what I mean by that, I have this word cloud on this page here. And it includes words such as disability, but also specific types of disabilities like deaf or blind, physical disability, but also other types of identities are included in this word cloud, such as young adults, people of color, LGBTQ, parents, professionals. And, this word cloud is kind of supposed to try to represent that disability is a cross-cutting issue, and it kind of interweaves with all of these other communities and intersects with all of these other communities. Well, let me just quickly introduce, actually, before I introduce myself, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I'd like to just acknowledge my co-presenters for today during this session, who have so graciously agreed to join me. I want to welcome Sylvia and Joey Lenny. And Sylvia and Joey Lenny, if you could please each just say a quick bit about who you are, your organization, what you do, your pronouns if you like. And then just as an icebreaker question, I'd like to also know, what is one place you're looking forward to traveling sometime in the future? So Sylvia, let's start with you.
Sounds great. Hello, everyone. Very pleased to be here speaking with you today and joining Ashley and Joy Lenny. I am Sylvia Stulewska, Senior Program Officer 2. I'm with IREX. I look forward to speaking with you later about strategies that my team and my project employs to be inclusive and make sure that we are raising and growing leaders in our program. My pronouns are she, her. I would love to travel to Zimbabwe soon. I hope I get the chance.
Thank you. I hope so too. Joey Lenny.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
You're sounding good.
Great. Hi, I'm Joy Lenny Moran. I am a project coordinator for the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange at MIUSA, which Ashley will talk a little bit more about later on. My pronouns are she, her. I think somewhere that I hope I'll make it to in the future is to visit is New Zealand. So we'll see.
That would be amazing. Well, I'd love to invite those who are attending here to share in the chat. What organization are you with? And what is a destination that you hope to visit in the near future? Just so we can get to know you a little bit better. As for me, I've been trying to brush up on Spanish, and I'd like to maybe visit Costa Rica someday, and maybe try some surfing or something. So, well, and let's see, any responses in the chat? It's probably hard to imagine where you want to go in the future. Maybe that's all you've been thinking about these past several months. Oh, here's a fellow Costa Rica lover, Kristen from Long Break Family Foundation. Would love to visit Costa Rica in the near future. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for being here. Thanks to everyone for being here. And let's revisit those slides. So bear with me as I share those again. And just to share a little bit about the organization that I'm coming from, which is Mobility International USA. And we're a nonprofit organization. You can call us MIUSA if you don't know us by Mobility International USA. But our nonprofit organization is designed to promote disability leadership globally. And the ways we do that tend to be through international exchange and international development. And ever since I've been working with MIUSA, for over 10 years now, I've been working on a project called the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department, the ECA, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And the purpose of this project is to really just provide a free resource, provide a free service to any organization that promotes international exchange between the United States and other countries, especially organizations that might have questions about how to include people with disabilities in their programs, whether those are study abroad, sports exchanges, volunteer exchanges, internships overseas, whatever those might be. So we work with a lot of universities, but also a lot of organizations and fellowship programs such as yourselves. And like I said, our goal is to offer a number of resources and services related to disability inclusion and international exchange. But I think even if your organization does not work in international exchange or international education, we still do have a vast compendium of online tip sheets, alumni stories, best practices, digital publications related to disability access, inclusion, and leadership. And so kind of throughout this presentation, Joey Lenny, who works with me at MIUSA on this project, might be popping in some resources in the chat box, but they'll also be available in the slideshow if you want to check them out later. And one of so my intention with this session is for you to get a little taste of different examples of fellowship programs, or in some cases, internship or externship programs that are, some might be disability focused, others might not be disability focused at all, but are still using these really forward-thinking strategies for including participants with disabilities in them. And so one example that I wanted to start with is one of our own projects, which is called the Access to Exchange Externship. And this is something that we launched for the first time last year during 2020. We wanted to have a virtual opportunity for people with disabilities. At the time, it was US folks, but this year we were able to expand it to both US and international externs. And so each year we posed a challenge to our externs. you as people with disabilities who have had some kind of international exchange experience, we want you to now take that experience and use it to encourage or encourage other people with disabilities to do international exchange or to create some sort of resource that will facilitate that. And so each extern, just depending on what their passions were, had to design and conduct some kind of virtual outreach activity. So for example, one person wanted to write a blog sharing stories about her account studying abroad in Argentina as a blind person. Another person created a podcast interviewing and also a YouTube channel interviewing other students with disabilities about their study abroad experiences. One person designed some webinars specifically for international student advisors on how they can make sure their international student orientations are more inclusive and accessible to students with disabilities. So there was a really wide variety of formats and products and resources that they developed. But one aspect of this externship that I think was a little bit eye-opening for a lot of our participants was this cross-disability emphasis. So at MyUSA, we recognize that disability comes in a lot of different forms. And we really want to promote cross-disability, which means, if you're someone who's blind, we want to make sure that things are accessible to you, but how can we also make sure that things are accessible to people with other types of disabilities? So for example, if you're creating a podcast, that's fantastic. But have you thought about how you're going to make that podcast accessible to deaf and hard of hearing people? If you're creating this PDF travel guide designed to help students learn about accessibility in Paris or France, have you thought about how you're going to make that guide accessible to someone who uses a screen reader technology, for example? And so I think that was a little mind-blowing for some of our externs to think about, like, well, I've advocated for disability inclusion and access for myself or for people in my specific disability community. But, they had a lot of great questions about, well, how can I make this more inclusive of other types of disabilities as well? So what we did was we hosted some info sessions addressing those questions. And then this is really important. In order to kind of show our commitment to the externs that this is really important, and we wanted their projects to reflect that cross-disability, we also budgeted funds for disability-related accommodations if externs needed it for their project. And that was separate from the stipend that we provided them with. So for example, if their project was a webinar and they wanted to arrange for hiring captioners or sign language interpreters, they would know that funding would not be a barrier to being able to make their project more inclusive and accessible. And so if you have any questions about the externship, I'd be happy to answer them. And I have the image I have here on the screen is a collage of the 10 externs, again, from the US and from around the world who participated in this year's externship. And one of them on the lower row in the center is a young woman wearing an orange top with a black headscarf and sunglasses. She's standing in front of the Washington Monument. I'm just pointing her out because she's going to come up a little later, so stay tuned. And in addition to MyUSA's externship program, I also want to share some examples of fellowships and similar programs that are run by organizations that are not disability organizations, but maybe they are creating some unique initiatives to try to increase the pipeline of young people with disabilities towards a certain goal of whether it's some sort of leadership goal. So another example I wanted to share is this the United Nations Volunteers Program, which since 2018, I believe, has been offering what it's calling the UNV Talent Program for young professionals with disabilities. And that's specifically trying to get young people with disabilities into the international development sector workforce. And it's doing that by having them work first in a UN Development Program office. And it's just great the way the techniques that they're using to recruit are very intentional and targeted. They really make it clear through their recruitment materials that this is a program. They're recruiting people with disabilities. They are using language on their recruitment materials, but also they came out with this really great video. And I have, excuse me, a screenshot of the video on my slide that shows one of the talent program participants who's deaf, who is signing. And the caption reads, "I work with the UN volunteers in Zambia." If we have some time at the end, I'd be happy to play this short video. And then he's standing next to his sign language interpreter. But this is a great recruitment resource just because I like that it includes captions, it includes people with disabilities sharing their first-person perspectives and their own stories and experiences. So that's something I'd really like to see more of. And again, you don't have to be a disability-focused organization or have a disability-focused initiative like this in order to do that. A similar example is the World Bank's Young Professionals Program. And I just wanted to share, again, they also made a really great recruitment video. They made a video for each of their program participants. And one of them in a recent cohort happens to be blind. And her video kind of talks a little bit about her experience as a blind person, but also more, for the context of this, more importantly, she's also talking about how that has shaped her experience with the World Bank Young Professionals Program, and also her goals for being a leader in the international development sector. And so I have a couple of, I copied over some language from their recruitment materials that I just wanted to highlight because I think they're great examples, but they include people with disabilities in their language when they say these groups are especially encouraged to apply. They also really give specific information about, well, I'll just read this. The Young Professionals Program conducts a disability inclusive recruitment process, including program information, informational videos, presentations, and brochures are all available in accessible formats. Excuse me, while disability accommodations are made available throughout the application and onboarding process. They also provided an email for how people with disabilities can contact the office to request materials or any kind of like specific disability related accommodations. So all of those things are really important. They also have a page where people can learn more about the organization's commitment to disability inclusion. These are all things that whatever fellowship program you offer, you can be doing. You can start using language in your recruitment materials that say, what kinds of disability related accommodations can people request? How can they request them? Who do they need to contact to get in touch? Is there some sort of timeline for that? And then any kind of reference that you can make to your organization's commitment to diversity, including disability. I think those are so important for potential applicants with disabilities to see, to know that you're not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, and to know that they're truly wanted in the program. Another example is the Watson Fellowship. They presented on our Joining Hands conference earlier this year about their one-year grant, which they call is for purposeful independent exploration outside of the United States. And that goes to graduating seniors at select US institutions. But we asked them to talk at our Joining Hands conference because they use a couple of different, they also have a number of Watson Fellows with disabilities who participate, go abroad, conduct their independent research. And some of the things that have come up for them is, arranging for disability-related accommodations funds that fellows may need as part of their budget. So be sure to, anytime you're thinking about disability inclusion, make sure you're thinking about budgeting for disability inclusion. Because without that, it's going to be very difficult to actually be able to honor your commitments. So for example, again, budgeting might go towards things like hiring sign language interpreters or captioning, or in the case of these fellowships, some sort of travel-related accommodation. And I think equally important to the budget for Watson was their emphasis on allowing for flexibility in their fellowships and in those budgets, which was really key for them. And we do have an alumni story by a Watson Fellow on MyUSA's own website, Laura Pod, so look for that later. But for now, let's see, do we have any questions? Has anything come in the chat while I've been speaking that I should address now? Let's see here. I'm seeing some comments. Can you give some examples of what that flexibility looks like? Oh, certainly. So for example, I think there's kind of this growing trend in grant making in general, where there's less rigidity around reporting or, requesting in advance. So it's my understanding that Watson provides the funds to the fellows to be able to use as they see fit. And the reporting aspect of it is a little bit more loose in terms of, they just provide general categories instead of having to account for every single detail. And Joey Lenny, I think you might remember that Watson speaking about that as well. So feel free to chime in if you have anything to add to that. And I'll try to find out more about that as well, but about the specifics. But Joey Lenny, let's have you talk a little bit about the AAPD Summer Internship Program, because this is another example of a disability-focused program that I think non-disability organizations can take a lot away from. So let's see, Joey Lenny, go ahead.
Thank you, Ashley. So first, I think I'll start by saying I was myself an AAPD intern summer of 2018. So that's my connection to this in particular. So I'll be sharing a bit more of my personal experience and what it looked like for me to sort of go through the program and learn from the work that they do. But the APD Summer Internship Program, APD, first of all, is a cross-disability national organization that works towards advancing the civil rights of people with disabilities and their involvement politically. And the internship program started in 2002. That basically intends to build the next generation of leaders and allow them to engage in internship programs or workforce opportunities so that they can have more options to develop professionally. We'll share a link to the program's website so that you can learn more from their own words and specific description, but it's pretty much an opportunity for people with disabilities that are college students or recent graduates, law students, or medical students to participate in an internship program during the summer. And it's in the Washington, D.C. area. So a lot of the placements are well-known sites. A lot of interns get placed in congressional offices. When I was an intern, I worked for a nonprofit organization as a policy intern. And I learned a lot about the field itself, but also had the opportunity to gain mentorship from the program because it came along with a mentor, and it also came along with additional certification as a disability rights advocate, which just served to inform me and the work that I was interested in doing a lot more. And then also it was an opportunity to engage with other emerging leaders with disabilities, something that is not as common. I think in my personal experience, in college in particular, I was often the only person in the room with a visible disability. And so having this opportunity to spend a whole summer with people that looked like me, had similar experiences, or very different experiences, because people pretty much had different disabilities overall. I think one of the highlights that Ashley also wanted me to make was that the program coordinators and the people who really sort of do everything in the background are also people with disabilities or have been working in the field of disabilities for a really long time. So there's also that aspect of mentorship. In the slide here, there's a picture actually of my cohort in 2018, and you can see there's about, I think, 29 people just smiling. There's a few wheelchair users in the front, both using manuals and electrical wheelchairs, people who look to be very different. I am on the far right. I have straight hair in this picture. Here I'm wearing cornrows, but yeah. And Ashley, I don't know if I am missing anything in particular that you'd like me to share.
Yeah, well, I think you were kind of alluding to this, but, and this is Ashley, just that intersectionality aspect of AAPD. Can you say something about that? Because I just noticed it seems like, you know, so many fellowships have an emphasis or, you know, an appreciation for diversity and intersectionality, but I think AAPD is a really great example of how, you know, by recruiting people with disabilities, it doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to have the same background or experience. They have, they're bringing a lot of different identities and parts of who they are with them. So, well, anything to add to that, Joey Lenny, or?
Yeah, this is Joy Lenny. So that's a great point, Ashley. I mean, it's not just cross disability. I had the opportunity to not only work alongside other people with different disabilities than myself, but also live with them, and so that experience is a whole lot different. But one thing that the program tries to do better and better every year is to make sure that their interns come from a diverse background, and there's people of color and people who have very different experiences, so that the conversation is not stirred to one particular experience or anything. Something that I particularly learned while becoming a part of the NCDE team is that you shared, you often scan through the bios of interns every year to see if any of them have international experiences or have
I do.
participated, in any sort of international fellowship, internship, or study abroad experiences. And that's something actually that I didn't think about as an intern, but when I was an intern, the semester right after, I was traveling to London for my study abroad experience. So I remember very vividly that some of the sessions that the interns had to participate in during that summer were targeted towards thinking about disability, not just locally, but internationally as well. And so I took some of that conversation with me when I went abroad, and it influenced a lot of my work after that. And so I think that that is something noteworthy to think about also, is that these experiences allow people with disabilities and people who are already leaders in their field to sort of think about the broader aspect of what it looks like around the world. So it might inspire some to take part in international experiences.
Thank you, Joey Lenny. This is Ashley. You were just talking about disability internationally, which I think is an excellent segue to turn it over to Sylvia and a little bit more about the program that she's working on at IREX. Sylvia, we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. This is Sylvia. I am with IREX. And I'd love to speak about the approaches and some tips and practical steps that we have taken on the program that I work on, which is the Global Yogurt Pakistan program, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Some tips and practical measures we've taken to support students or participants with disabilities. And if I could, no approach is similar because no person is similar, right? Everyone has their unique needs and unique set of abilities. But if I could summarize maybe our approach, I've tried to do so here on this screen in terms of steps, how we approach preparation and then support of participants with disabilities on our program. So first of all, it starts with allocating resources, right? So each time that we submit a proposal for our budget, we always do our best to include funding for disability support, which is really important. And it starts there, right? And then we work with our funders who are very supportive in terms of supporting participants with disabilities to allocate additional funding should we have residuals or savings from a certain part of the program. So we make sure that we have the resources to the best of our ability to support participants. I think it's also really important to know the cultural context, when supporting participants. And what does that mean? So, for example, in the context of Pakistan, and again, this is it does not mean that it's so in every situation, but what we found throughout many years working on the program is sometimes participants are reticent to kind of disclose their needs, the full extent of the supports that they might need, because they have a misperception that somehow that might, for example, impact their status on the program or their ability to fully participate, which of course is not the case. But it helps us to know the cultural context through which participants might be answering our pre-program questions, so that we can better know what to anticipate, and then we can frame our approach and the wording when we collect, for example, disability questionnaires in a manner that is very open, that clearly states that really the purpose of this is to support you and make sure that you're able to participate in all and every aspects of the program experience. So we're very intentional in how we communicate, because we know that there could be those misperceptions, right, in the back of their minds. And in terms of preparation, for example, we've worked with Mayusa to adapt some questionnaires for our program so that when we are informed that, a participant has a visible or invisible disability, that will be arriving on the program, we, even before they're in the United States, we can initiate that conversation and ask them about, okay, like, what are your needs? What do you currently use in terms of technology or not? So that we can find appropriate resources or comparable resources in the United States that would at least allow them to start in comfort when they're here, and then maybe grow from that point on. So if somebody is accustomed to using a screen reader of a certain brand, we try to make sure that that one is available or as close to that one is available, because once they arrive in the US, they're going through so many changes and adaptations. At least they can start using technology that they're familiar with while they grow on and learn to perhaps use some other new technologies, for example. So ask the experts, right? And that's exactly what I meant when I said, we've been working with Mayusa to adapt questionnaires where we ask our participants even ahead of their arrival in the programs. We also work with other organizations locally. We work, with, for example, the American Foundation for the Blind, or, just other organizations that have a wealth of resources and knowledge and that could be supportive, and some regional organizations. The other point I would say is seek out dedicated partners, which we're very lucky to do. So our program works with partner host institutions, colleges and universities all across the United States. And it's so wonderful to work with a group of people who are as dedicated as we are to supporting participants with disabilities. And they can be amazing resources in terms of identifying those on-the-ground supports and community resources that will help the participants. And then promoting a well-rounded program experience. That means that, participants who have a disability, that's just one part of who they are. They're here to enjoy the wealth of program experiences and to make sure that they grow as leaders. Our program, for example, the Global Yoga Pakistan program, has a leadership component. It's very much in tune in terms of developing soft and hard leadership skills for growth and future professional and academic development. And we have a curriculum that we walk participants through. So it's the same for all of our participants, regardless of their ability status, to make sure that they are able to partake in each of the program components, in terms of capacity building, in terms of cultural exchange, in terms of workshops, etc. So it's very important to have that holistic approach. And it's something that's really worked for us previously. So I'd love to illustrate some of these points that I've made through examples of wonderful alumni that are on our program. And if you could please go to the following slide. And I'm going to describe here what I'm seeing on this slide. And it's Asma, our alumna, who studied at the Georgia College and State University in Milledgeville, Georgia. And I have here a set of pictures. The first photo shows Asma learning at a desk on a computer, a software that will help her to read classroom notes more easily. The second photo is Asma in traditional dress from her specific area of Pakistan, participating in a international fashion show at her host university. And then the last picture is Asma practicing using a cane while walking on the street. So,
and this is Ashley, if I can just jump in. So those of you who remember when I said, okay, remember this face, this is Asma, who later went on to do NCD's Access to Exchange Fellowship. And I remember Asma saying how meaningful that, I remember her talking about that fashion show at least once. So I'm glad to see a picture from that event.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Ashley, that Asma, after graduating from our program and going back, has been a fantastic advocate for other students with disabilities at her home institution in Pakistan, and also as an intern with Mayusa as well. Really, continued to grow her own understanding, advocacy ability, and then spread that awareness in her home community in Pakistan. So what we were able to do with when Asma arrived on campus in Georgia, Asma had not had much experience at all using technology, right? So this is when I speak about different approaches work for different participants. Each one has a different set of skills that they come with or knowledge. And so, Asma had relied on, somebody reading her class notes vocally. And, obviously in the United States, the program that she was in required her to, in her particular field of study, required her to go through a lot of readings and a lot of classroom notes. So it was important that we were growing her ability to be able to go through that material quicker instead of relying on third parties to read that to her. So with support from our funder and with support from our partners at Georgia College and State, we were able to identify a program at the Savannah Center for Blind and Low Vision that she was able to complete during her spring break. So she was able to take that time when she was away from classes and away from her host community to complete a week-long program that was really focused on teaching her practical skills that she could employ in her day-to-day life, and also to gain practical skills for studying and learning as she will continue her education and higher education moving forward. So that was a fantastic experience that, we dedicated a lot of, we allocated resources in terms of staff time to research. We worked with partners to identify these opportunities. And then we were able to work with the center in Savannah directly to enable this experience for Asma. Mindful of time, I'm going to go to the next slide here and share a couple more examples of our wonderful alumni who are going on to do such fantastic things back in their communities in Pakistan. So we have Abdul here to the left, who was at Snow College in Utah. And Abdul had lost use of both of his arms in his youth and really relied on using his feet to do a lot of his everyday tasks, including typing on the computer, cooking in the kitchen and other items. So what we wanted to make sure that Abdul felt comfortable to move around campus. So we worked with our partners at Ephraim in Utah to make sure that he was comfortable moving on campus between his classes. We also took cues from him in terms of what he felt most comfortable during events that were shared, the workshops, when he wanted to eat his meals. Did he want to do it in the same room with everybody else? Did he prefer to have a separate space to himself? So really, we just took cues from him as to his comfort level and what he felt most comfortable with. And Abdul also nurtured a lot of his other interests while he was on campus. He has a passion for soccer or football. And he was able to coach a youth soccer league in his host community in Utah, because that's something he's so passionate with. And it was wonderful for his host community to see a leader, a youth leader in action as their coach, as someone that they look up to, but who also happens to be somebody who has a disability. So that was also wonderful. And that's what I mean by having a comprehensive, well-rounded program experience. All of our participants who come have interests that we encourage them to pursue for a well-rounded program. And then finally, Arisha, we had at SUNY Plattsburgh in New York. This is a photo on the screen of Arisha with actually her friendship family from the United States. They ended up visiting her in Pakistan, and that's cultural diplomacy at work, right? So she was able to, Arisha is blind, but she was able to have a fantastic experience. And one of the wonderful ways she got engaged on campus is she was able to serve, as part of her program requirements, she found an opportunity to serve in the student conduct office. So she was able to, alongside faculty and students, hear cases about academic misconduct or dishonesty, and contribute her viewpoint and really contribute her own perspective. And Arisha went back to Pakistan, and one of the aspects she was advocating for in her home university in Faisalabad, which has about 20,000 students, that there was no office to offer specific support for students with disabilities. So she was meeting with the leadership at the university president and dean, to advocate that they make room in their budget for support services with students with disabilities. And this is what she did upon return. So really, these are just some ways that we have been able to find ways to support students with disabilities and participants, but also in ways that they have embraced their leadership journey here to then go back to their home communities and make positive change.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. I love these examples. I love the emphasis on leadership, because ultimately, we can talk about logistics of budgeting and recruitment, but just remember what it's all going towards, the hopes of more and more leaders being people with disabilities, whether they're apparent disabilities or non-apparent disabilities. It makes such an impact on their host communities, on their home communities, as you've illustrated through these wonderful stories and alumni anecdotes. So thank you for that. We received a great question in the chat. I'm sure we have many, but one that stood out was, well, we are committed to, we want people with disabilities to participate in our programs, but what if they're just not applying, or what if we're not seeing that they're there? Well, I do have a few suggestions for that. And one is something that Sylvia had brought up. She had said, seek out dedicated partners and also find experts. And I wanted to kind of combine those two tips. I'm sorry if you're hearing an echo. I'm not sure what's causing that. But not just seeking out those disability organizations for expert advice, but asking them, can you help me promote this opportunity to your community? At MyUSA, one thing we talk about a lot is infiltration. So our message to the disability community is, these are your programs, infiltrate them, apply, even if they don't specifically say this is for people with disabilities. That shouldn't stop you from applying if you're otherwise qualified. But more often, we've also been talking about reverse infiltration. And that's where you all come in, where you're kind of not sitting around waiting for people to apply, but how can you infiltrate the disability community, if you will, and really make sure that they're aware of your programs, schedule a meeting, an info session, invite them an organization to get to know you more in the hopes that they can connect you to their alumni. And one thing that another example of this is we say, hey, check out AAPD. They have a cohort of hundreds of amazing, talented people with disabilities who have gone through their internship program and who are now working in all types of sectors and fields. MIUSA might be able to help you promote some of your opportunities and programs depending on what they are. And so if there's anything that we can do to assist, we'd love to do that. And speaking of AAPD, the internship program about which Joey Lenny spoke, they also welcome new host placement organizations in a number of different sectors and fields. So if that's something that's of interest to you, you're in luck, because this is one of the first years that they're not limiting it to DC area organizations, but also expanding it more broadly thanks to a virtual component as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, check that out. And we're wrapping up now. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful questions. And I know you have to, you're heading to your next event soon. But really quickly, I'm also just going to let you know that these slides also have a number of resources that we talked about during this session, whether through the MIUSA website or the student stories, some webinar recordings that go into some of these programs more in depth, and more about the AAPD and externship projects through MIUSA. Well, with that, thank you so much, everyone. Any final words from our co-presenters or our attendees? You're welcome to leave your messages in the chat, attendees. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. And I'll stick around for a few minutes in case anyone has any last questions. But otherwise, thank you so much. It really means a lot to us that you care about this topic to join us. And thank you to Sylvia and Joey Lenny and IFS as well for making this possible.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And should anyone have any questions about our program and our approaches, Ashley would be pleased to put you in touch with me. It was a pleasure to present with you, Ashley and Joy Lenny.
Thank you. This is Joy Lenny. Thank you, Sylvia and Ashley. I just wanted to quickly connect back to Ashley's suggestion of connecting with AAPD. They do a great job of supporting both the intern and the placement organizations in managing accommodations in the workplace. So if you're trying to learn more about how to support people with disabilities in the workplace and in what you do, the APD program and becoming one of their placements is definitely a thing to consider. And I hope you all take advantage of the resources that we were able to share with you all today. So thank you.